Have you ever wondered why some of old Hollywood's brightest stars always seemed glued to a cocktail glass, even before the director shouted action? It wasn't just an image, it was a crack. The brutal pressure from studios, the buried traumas, and a culture that glamorized endless partying turned alcohol from a prop into a daily lifeline. Behind those dazzling on-screen smiles were stories darker and more haunting than any role they ever played. They acted so well the world believed they were fine. But when the lights went out, only they and the bottomless glass remained. A reality soaked in silence, sorrow, and something no script could ever truly capture. Stay with us to the very end, because this isn't just about fame and downfall. It's about the bitter whispers behind the stage lights. The image of a man standing in the middle of a Los Angeles street, clutching a bottle of gin and mumbling Hamlet's soliloquy, wasn't a performance. It was John Barrymore's reality. Once hailed as America's greatest Hamlet, he was a towering figure of Broadway and early Hollywood. But alcohol, once a symbol of Prohibition-era sophistication, gradually became the chain that strangled his brilliance. Barrymore believed the buzz made him sharper and more charming, but in truth, it blurred every performance, causing missed lines and unsteady steps. Films like 20th Century became ordeals, and radio stations had to re-record him just to salvage a coherent few minutes. Studios even hired around-the-clock minders to keep him sober, but the darkness within Barrymore was harder to chase away. He died at age 60, alone and ruined, his liver destroyed by gin, his legacy clouded by regret. He was the first chapter in Hollywood's long tragedy, a luminous talent who could not escape the grip of the glass. W.C. Fields, the king of sharp-witted comedy, lived a silent tragedy behind his biting humor. His writing desk had two drawers, one for scripts, one for bourbon. He once claimed alcohol co-wrote his jokes, that it sparked the punchlines. But behind the laughs were chronic pain from stage injuries and a gnawing loneliness that only liquor seemed to soothe. While filming Never Give a Sucker an Even Break, he vanished from set for 3 straight days, forcing the crew to piece scenes together like a jigsaw puzzle. To fool the cameras and censors, he used tea dye to look like liquor, but hid real whiskey in hollowed props, fake apples, books, even canes. The audience still laughed, but insurers refused to cover him, and roles slowly dried up. Fields died in 1946, his liver failing, his body frail, and his laughter forever silenced. His life proved a grim truth. Not everyone who makes the world laugh can save themselves. When the spotlight fades, only the echoes of laughter remain, and the heavy silence of a soul drowned by drink. They called him the Great Stone Face, a silent genius whose deadpan expression never failed to spark laughter. But off-screen, his hands trembled and whiskey was his first touch every morning. Buster Keaton reigned supreme in silent comedy, yet when MGM stripped his creative control in 1928, his life spiraled into silence of another kind. Whiskey became his set companion, even before breakfast. Off-duty, he played poker till dawn, taking a swig with every fold. Friends blamed the ruthless studio system and a crushing divorce. Keaton? He simply said, "Drinking is just another kind of performance." In what? No beer? Зрение он стилизировал так, что режиссеры молча подсчитали разрушенные дубляжи. MGM let him go. He drifted into obscurity, borrowing cash from extras who once idolized him. Only in late life did television resurrect his fame. By then, he was sober, older, and quietly mourning the years he surrendered to amber oblivion. Once, in the hallway of a courthouse during his 1943 sexual assault trial, Errol Flynn clutched a bottle of rum beneath his tailored coat. In real life, he was wilder than his roles in Captain Blood or Robin Hood. Born in Tasmania, rebellion was in his blood, and mediocrity was his greatest fear. Alcohol gave him swagger, made him magnetic, and ultimately unmanageable. Directors whispered about scenes lost to forgotten lines, choreographed swordplay requiring hidden stools to keep him upright. Though bloated and unreliable, the studios clung to him for box office draw. Audiences hadn't yet seen the cracks. On the set of The Sun Also Rises, Flynn was nearly dropped due to physical instability. At 50, doctors said his heart resembled that of a 70-year-old. He died as a fallen comet, not for lack of talent, but because no one could rescue him from the drink that burned behind his smile. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe to follow more untold legends. He was the face of raw, honest acting, immortalized in classics like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and Bad Day at Black Rock. But behind each flawless performance lay a silent tremble, a lifetime haunted by alcohol. Spencer Tracy bore the weight of Catholic guilt, a deaf son, and an affair with Katharine Hepburn, a woman who often hid his bottles and dragged him to AA meetings. Between films, he would retreat to rehab or rest homes, only to return and deliver award-winning performances. Tracy once said, "Sobriety is a role I can't play." Studios had to build sets around his home because of his failing health. Yet he kept acting, burning bright until his final breath, a fire that dazzled on screen, even as the bottle consumed him from within. That gravelly voice wasn't just natural, it was soaked in decades of whiskey and martinis. Humphrey Bogart, star of Casablanca, rarely parted with his highball glass, whether on screen or off. He drank for camaraderie, to quiet war memories and dull the pain of a broken first marriage. On the set of The African Queen, he and John Huston drank to fight malaria while Katharine Hepburn stuck to water and watched them stumble, still laughing. By midlife, Bogart was still magnetic, but his roles shrank and his liver ached. He died at 57 of esophageal cancer, joking, "I should never have switched from scotch to martinis." The drink that shaped his legend also etched the cracks behind his charm, a double-edged legacy born in fame, buried in smoke. Montgomery Clift's angelic beauty once captivated Hollywood. But a devastating car crash in 1956 shattered his face, and with it, his confidence and career. After hours of reconstructive surgery, he returned to set, but he was never the same. He drank to numb physical pain and to silence the whispers of those who once idolized his perfect face. During the filming of Raintree County, Elizabeth Taylor fed him lines through a bathroom door as he vomited blood. Alcohol and painkillers became his daily ritual. Directors kept a chair nearby for him to collapse between takes. From a rising star, Clift became uninsurable box office poison. He died at 45, officially from a heart attack, but truly from a soul long drowned in booze and broken mirrors. Judy Garland was groomed under MGM's relentless spotlight since childhood. Pep pills by day, sleeping pills mixed with brandy by night, all to keep her glowing on screen. As an adult, she remained hooked on stimulants, and alcohol became her lullaby. Obsessed with her weight, looks, and voice, Judy bore the crushing expectations of being the perfect performer. While filming A Star is Born, she was so intoxicated that choreographers had to reblock dance scenes to mask her imbalance. When studios stopped insuring her, she turned to concerts, where greeting fans gave way to breathalyzer tests. Yet her voice never failed to move hearts, no matter how broken her own was. In 1969, she died from an overdose, ending the life of a star who never truly got to live. On screen, William Holden was the epitome of rugged charm, tough, composed, charismatic. But behind the scenes, he couldn't let go of the vodka bottle. Holden began drinking during World War II, initially for stress relief, then as a creative crutch. The more successful he became, the more he drank. In films like Stalag 17 and The Wild Bunch, he radiated confidence. Yet crews always kept buckets of ice on hand to cool his face between takes. When drunk, he could be abrasive and volatile. Directors used body doubles even for walking scenes. He hid liquor in fire extinguishers, calling it emergency gear. In 1981, William Holden died in his apartment. He fell, hit his head, and bled to death, too drunk to call for help. It was a quiet, haunting end, fitting for a man who, in his final years, faded into solitude and vodka-soaked silence. "Baby, I don't care," Robert Mitchum famously said, and he lived by it. Mitchum embodied defiance, both in his roles and in real life. Haunted by wartime memories, he turned to bourbon for solace. While filming Heaven Knows Mr. Allison, he challenged director John Huston to a drinking duel and woke up tied to a mule cart on set. The studio called it method research. When drunk, he might brawl, disappear, or return to deliver flawless scenes. His contracts always included strict morality clauses, which he joked made perfect coasters for his drinks. In later years, Mitchum only played craggy, haunted patriarchs, his alcohol-scarred face no longer suited for heroes. Even after the drinking slowed, the damage remained, etched into every frame he left behind. She was Hollywood's brightest diamond, but behind those iconic violet eyes lay a heart shattered many times by alcohol and pills. Elizabeth Taylor began drinking to dull chronic back pain from a set injury, later to escape the glare of fame and failed marriages. On the set of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, her performance blurred so deeply with reality that co-stars couldn't tell acting from intoxication. Her Pepsi cans were filled with martinis, and breathalyzer tests preceded costume fittings. Yet Taylor turned collapse into cause. She became one of the first celebrities to publicly enter rehab, later founding the Betty Ford Center that helped thousands reclaim their lives. "The hardest role I ever played was myself, sober," she once said. More than a beauty or talent, she became a symbol of resilience. Joan Crawford, with her steel gaze and commanding stride, once ruled Hollywood. But behind her polished exterior was a woman haunted by poverty, obsessed with control. Her days started with Bloody Marys, and she insisted her stylists drink with her to maintain appearance. During the filming of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, it's rumored Bette Davis swapped her Coke with gin, turning every scene into a battle of queens. Directors complained of slurred dialogue. Lighting crews hauled extra rigs to hide morning-after puffiness. When Crawford died in 1977 from pancreatic cancer, her drawer was found lined with empty Smirnoff minis, the silent credits of a life too tightly choreographed to ever breathe. Once the sultry pinup with the iconic peekaboo hair, Veronica Lake was a wartime dream girl fighting her own battle behind closed doors. Studios pressured her into pills for weight control, and she countered with barbiturates and nightly cocktails. Married to an alcoholic director, her marriage became her second battlefield. On The Blue Dahlia, she often arrived drunk, prompting co-star Alan Ladd to threaten to quit. Directors fed her lines one by one, lighting technicians' angled beams to hide her sleepless, sunken eyes. After several box office flops, the studios dropped her. When the spotlight vanished, she wandered anonymously through streets that once adored her. She worked as a waitress in a dim New York bar under her birth name, Connie Ockelman. Few recognized the silver-haired woman with a distant gaze. When asked about her fall, she quipped, "I've hit bottom so many times, the basement feels like home." It wasn't a joke, it was her legacy. The boy genius who crafted Citizen Kane at 25 also drank like a poet, perpetually heartbroken. Orson Welles toasted triumphs and drowned rejections with equal vigor. While filming The Lady from Shanghai, he disappeared into coastal taverns, returning with slurred brilliance. Cruise kept two schedules, one real, one emergency. The more studios clipped his wings, the more he drank, ballooned, and drifted from major projects. Studios branded him a financial risk. Friends saw a lonely man armed with wit and sorrow. "My doctor told me to stop having dinners for 4 unless there are 3 other people," he joked. But behind that dry smile was a heart that never forgave the world for turning its back. Near the end, he narrated B-movies to pay bar tabs, a genius who refused to bow out, even when no one stood beside him. Dean Martin, the effortlessly cool charmer, was always smiling, drink in hand, joke on tongue, lighting up rooms with his presence. But behind the image was a man cloaked in sadness and pressure. On stage with the Rat Pack, Martin pretended to be tipsy, but had already knocked back a few bourbons before curtain call. The lovable drunk persona became his brand, and producers begged him never to sober up. After his son's death in 1987, Martin shut down. He withdrew from the stage, from friends, and began drinking not for laughs, but for sorrow. In his final years, he rarely left his home, living like a ghost in the world that once adored him. He died in 1995, a comedic genius the world remembered for laughter, while forgetting the tears behind the curtain. The glitz had masked the cost too well, until only a weary figure remained in a room with no applause. What do you think about this journey? Leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe for more stories from behind the spotlight. They once said, "As long as Mickey Rooney smiles, America will be okay." But when the boyish Andy Hardy grew up, the smile became a crack. Rooney became famous too young, too fast, and never had permission to stop. MGM gave him a personal bartender at 17. With 5 failed marriages, 2 bankruptcies, and haunting wartime memories, he drank to forget. On the set of Breakfast at Tiffany's, he hid whiskey in a mouthwash bottle. As he aged, the roles shrank, but his presence still stirred hearts. His eyes clouded, his voice trembling. He often slept in guest houses he once owned. In the quiet nights, without applause, he would step onto tiny stages and tell his stories like fairy tales tinged with sorrow. Later in life, through faith and local theater, he reclaimed parts of himself, but the shadow of his past never truly let go. Even under dim lights, he held onto that smile, as if a generation still waited for him to take the stage. Barbara Payton was one of Hollywood's most glaring tragedies. Bursting onto the scene with her fiery beauty and fearless presence, she was quickly swallowed by the glamour and predation lurking behind the cameras. After starring in Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye alongside James Cagney, she became the talk of the town. But the spotlight lasted only a moment. Scandals, including a violent love triangle that landed one man in a coma, shattered her career. Rejected by studios, she spiraled into alcohol and homelessness. Barbara once traded her own pin-up photos for drinks in seedy bars. Loved ones found her curled beneath a bridge, clinging to an empty vodka bottle like a lifeline. She died at 39 of heart failure, but in truth, that heart had broken long before, crushed between golden dreams and a glass bottle. She once had it all: beauty, fame, powerful lovers. But she couldn't hold on to herself. Robert Walker, familiar for his haunting performance in Strangers on a Train, was a painful example of untreated emotional wounds. Behind those sharp eyes and calm demeanor lay a soul battered by war and the breakup of his marriage to Jennifer Jones. Shy and gentle off-screen, Walker feared the spotlight, the camera, and sometimes even himself. He hid bottles in every pocket, using liquor as a temporary shield against a world that demanded he keep performing. During a reshoot of Since You Went Away, he was so drunk the director filmed him lying on a couch, rewriting the scene around his condition. His psychiatrist prescribed heavy sedatives, and when mixed with alcohol, the result proved deadly. He died at 32 after a calming injection meant to ease his agitation. But everyone knew the real storm wasn't in his body. It raged in a heart that never knew comfort. He was the kind of soul that needed just one steady embrace, but sadly, Hollywood had no role for that kind of vulnerability. Alan Ladd, the quiet hero of the silver screen with modest height and steely eyes, proved that legends don't need to shout. But behind the glow of Shane and those stoic cowboy roles was a soul quietly unraveling. Raised in poverty, having lost his father early, Ladd battled chronic insomnia and chose vodka as his nightly sedative. On set, directors used long lenses to hide his trembling hands and puffy eyes. He'd soak in ice-cold baths each morning just to be alert enough to shoot the day's first scene. Studios still bet on his image, but internal memos labeled him an emotional risk. In 1962, Ladd shot himself in the chest, allegedly a drunken accident. 2 years later, he died of a fatal mix of alcohol and pills. Some say the lone cowboy had turned the gun on his own shadow, lost in a West with no way out. Bela Lugosi, who defined Dracula with a haunting gaze and thunderous voice, was ultimately devoured by that very shadow. After his iconic 1931 performance, he was typecast into horror roles, never again offered serious dramatic parts. A Hungarian stage actor by origin, Lugosi spiraled into poverty, drowning in alcohol and morphine to escape the image he no longer controlled. On the set of White Zombie, his brandy scent was so overpowering they lit candles to mask it. For Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, cue cards the size of tombstones were used. He couldn't remember his lines. Bankrupt, he performed spooky stage shows in small towns, emerging from coffins as a grotesque parody. Still, he became one of the first stars to publicly enter rehab, a bold move for his time. Bela Lugosi died in full Dracula costume, as if he never escaped the role that made him. Peter O'Toole, the man who embodied Lawrence of Arabia, was the epitome of an artist who lived fiercely and burned brightly. He once said, "I know I'm immortal, at least until tomorrow morning." Behind those sea-green eyes and roguish charm was a soul drowned in Guinness and white nights of drunken poetry. After his early triumphs, O'Toole became infamous for challenging co-stars to drink every pub in London dry. His liver was so damaged, Most of his stomach had to be removed in 1965. Still, he carried on, with lighter drinks, deeper stories, and a smirk more biting than ever. He blamed his Oscar losses on the Academy's quiet jealousy of his reckless ways. Even after sobering up later in life, he still returned to old bars, not to drink, but to relive the glory of a youth that had become legend. Lee Marvin, tall, gravel-voiced, cold-eyed, was the archetype of the rugged man Hollywood adored, gritty, rough, and dangerous. But behind that image was a former Marine, carrying shrapnel from war and nightmares that never ceased. He drank as if in combat, each binge a battlefield. On the set of The Dirty Dozen, he was known to bring a bottle of Jack Daniels at 6 a.m., drinking and challenging co-stars to fistfights. Once he punched through a hotel wall, delaying production for 6 weeks. Directors who worked with Marvin always kept extra first aid kits and stunt doubles nearby, just in case the whiskey rage returned. In his final years, he battled severe cirrhosis and died awaiting a liver transplant. They say Marvin lived as he acted, fiercely, sensually, and never on his knees. Richard Burton, with his smoldering baritone and melancholic gaze, was a titan of the stage and screen, his presence regal, his voice a force of nature. But beyond the curtain, he was consumed by love and liquor. His fiery romance with Elizabeth Taylor was both passion and poison. They married, divorced, then married again, all under the haze of alcohol. He drank from dawn till dusk, performed on stage with breath thick with booze, yet still delivered monologues that shook the rafters. "I can recite Dylan Thomas for hours," he once said, "because I practiced in pubs my whole life." Despite 7 Oscar nominations, he never won, as if Hollywood admired the pain he portrayed but never reached the man slowly breaking underneath. As we look back on the faces etched into cinematic memory, what lingers is not just their legendary roles, but the quiet price they paid in the shadows. They moved the world, yet couldn't save themselves. Beneath the spotlight, they were immortal. But beyond the screen, they were just souls adrift, fighting battles the audience never saw. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, so the lessons behind the curtain are never forgotten. See you in the next journey, where the past and the light collide once more.